Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of FLINT Talks. Today, I'm joined by two awesome FLINT members from down the other side of the country, and we are going to be talking about a topic that will be very applicable to a lot of people listening to this podcast, especially those that might be looking for a new role or to expand their current role in the technology industry. So, before we jump into the conversation today, I'd love for my two fellow voices to introduce themselves. Dave, will we start with you?
Sure thing. My name's Dave. I'm the head of software engineering at Connect 360, a small company that work with IAG around loyalty. I am part of the Christchurch Flint lead team, and I have a lot of experience about communication, have moved into a management role after being a developer, and have learned a lot in my career. I'll hand over to you, Amie.
Hello, I'm Amie. I have only just recently joined Flint. I'm on a leadership journey and I am currently a change management professional working at the City Council. Here to chat
Awesome.
about comms.
Yeah, I mean, sounds like we've got some great options for background and things for this conversation. A little bit about me for those that haven't listened to the other episodes. My name is Caitlin, and I am a head of customer success at Intuito, which is an online learning company. So my day in, day out is helping organizations and associations train people online in the most efficient way possible. So yeah, between the three of us, I think we've got a lot of breadth of knowledge across a whole range of industries and sub-industries within the tech space. So throwing it back to you, Dave, do you maybe want to give people a little bit of a introduction to communication styles and what we might be talking about today?
Yeah, absolutely. Through a lot of different training that I've done, we have identified kind of a two-axis grid that people mostly sit on in terms of their communication style. If you think of the horizontal grid or horizontal line as task focused on the left-hand side and people focused on the right-hand side, and the vertical as quick processing to needing more time to process. So you then tend to fall into one of the four quadrants of task focused fast, task focused slow, people focused fast, or people focused slow. And you kind of end up profiling yourself a little bit into these categories. I myself sit in the task focused fast category, which is considered to be direct, very upfront, wants to get the work done, results oriented, that sort of thing. And we also tend to find that people in tech in general fall on that task focused left hand side. So often also quite analytical, reserved, liking to understand the entire problem before actually doing anything about it, is the conscientiousness side as well. So we'll talk a little bit about what these communication styles actually mean, how you can use them to communicate with different communication styles, and when it's appropriate to dive into something that you may not be defaulting to.
Awesome. Amy, did you want to add anything to that?
I was just thinking myself, I wonder where I would fall into this quadrant. And I'm sitting there going, am I people? Am I task? Am I fast? Am I slow? That's
Yeah.
quite an interesting one.
Absolutely. Just listening to that, I'm thinking maybe I am more task than people, but I always would have like assumed I was more people than task. But I guess as we go along, maybe we can share what we think we are at the end once we've learned a little bit more.
Sounds good. I can also give a bit more context around the people side. I just kind of listed off the task side because that's what I default to. And just a bit of context as well. This is more of a profiling technique and it doesn't apply to everybody. The main thing as well is that it is your kind of default behavior and you can act in other ways when appropriate. So you kind of use this sort of technique to figure out where you sit, what your default is, where it's easiest for you to go. And then when you expend a bit more energy and effort, you can fall into the other categories to communicate more easily with people that fall into those categories. People focus side would be active listening, lively when they're listening. It's very much that conversation and like lots of hand gestures, that sort of thing. Asks about the who in the conversation and is really open about their feelings at the time, especially about the conversation. And then somebody who's also people focused, but more on that slower processing side, is that steady wall, that calm and friendly person, the person that you want to cry on the shoulder of, that they're always there and ready for you. Very rarely will show emotion, but feels a lot of emotion, and often will have a very friendly eye contact and receptive listening.
Interesting. Yeah, I feel like I'm probably a people fast just from that very quick intro there. I don't know if you've seen already, but I use my hands a lot, and my face is always like exactly showing how I feel. There's no hiding anything on this thing. I've been told even in meetings, they're like, you need to watch your face.
I
Amy, you
used to
agree
be
with
I
that?
used to be really good at hiding how I felt on my face, and it was a superpower of mine. And now it's not so much that if I'm sitting in a meeting and I'm confused, I've got that line it's
Yeah.
developing on my forehead from the constant state of perplexion by either what people are saying or like the thing that they're talking about. But all of those different categories that you mentioned, I felt like I resonated with each area. I was like, oh yeah, no, I'm definitely task focused. Oh no, maybe I'm a fast people focused. Oh no, I'm definitely a bit slow people. So now I'm just baffled at what I am.
Sorry to cause the confusion.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that kind of lends to Dave what you were talking about earlier then, Amy. You've just mastered the moving between the different communication styles depending on what you need. So you might be our expert here. You've already done it.
No, me.
Cool. Dave, do you want to maybe have a little bit of chat about what each of those kind of styles is best for? Maybe different roles that use it, that kind of thing?
Absolutely. Uh, Short answer, there isn't a best. Everybody is different, and the situation will always change depending on who you're having a conversation with. So oftentimes, let's say you're in an interview situation and you need to be able to resonate with the people that are interviewing you. Depending on who you're interviewing with, you'll want to be able to use a different communication technique to really connect with that person. Let's say the person is from human resources, they tend to be very people focused as part of their job. That is kind of the whole reason that they're there. So you want to make sure that you're using emotion and that feeling to be able to connect with them as a person on the interview. However, if you're interviewing somebody who's potentially your technical lead, like a senior developer, you'll want to use more rational communication techniques, such as talking about numbers of projects that you've worked on or percentages of successful deployments, that sort of thing, to be able to resonate more with that rational, logical side of their brain. So it really does depend. And you need to kind of profile the person that you're talking about, which sounds awful. Talking about profiling other people does not ever sound great, but you need to kind of understand where they're coming from and how they default to be able to resonate with them and then have a stronger impact.
Couldn't
Absolutely.
agree more.
Amy, then, since you feel like you fit with a whole bunch of them, do you maybe know which one you would use in different situations depending on who you're talking to?
I think if you were to ask people I work with, I would sit in that people space, but that also, I believe, comes with the job of being in change management where we're dealing with people. We're not necessarily, I mean, we are task focused, but we're not changing a process as such. We're changing the way people work with the process. So I would say, on a whole, I would default to people. I also have learned that I give off a very friendly and safe vibe, and I get a lot of people's, I don't want to say negativity, but they feel safe to tell me how they're feeling and the honest truth around how they're feeling. So I think also reading how people talk to me, I probably sit in people somewhere between, maybe I'm a medium speed.
Medium speed. I love that. I'm just thinking from what I do for a job, I often sit kind of in the sales cycle and then take people on the journey of implementation and kind of in that onboarding process. And I think that's probably where my switch happens from people to task is in that sales mode, you're wanting to get to know them, become friends with them, build that relationship. But then the minute they've made that decision to sign up, then I'm straight task focused. Okay, we need to do this, this, and this to get you actually using the platform correctly. I switch from being a friend to essentially kind of telling you what to do. Not that it's not friendly, but it definitely moves to okay, I've got all these points that I need to make you hit, and we've got all these steps to get you there. So yeah, that's I think a bit of a switch, and I guess it's a unique position as well that I traverse from sales through to onboarding account management, which tends to be split in different teams, I guess, in larger companies, but we've got 2.5 people that do that whole process. So we don't have that. If we split it completely, then someone will be away and we just won't have a sales team for a few days or something like that. But yeah, very interesting to think about how things switch depending on who you're talking to for sure.
I have a question for both of you, and Amie, maybe you can kick this off. When we spoke before this call, you talked a lot about your leadership journey, and I'm curious to know what sort of communication techniques and things you've had to work on as you progress through your career.
Where do I start? I One of the things that stuck with me the most is when I was first, I think I was actually a grad at the time. I was out to another company contracting, and I would watch my boss from this new company and the boss from the company that I was contracted out from interact. They were very fun and friendly and making jokes. And that's the kind of person I am naturally. And that's the kind of person I also wanted to be as a leader. I didn't want to be that super direct, cold person that no one wants to speak to. I also couldn't be that if I tried, I don't think. Um, but I learned that you have to earn essentially that right. Because if I was coming in as a grad, acting a bit too much like I didn't care, like I wasn't really listening, engaged to what was going on, it wouldn't give off the impression that I could do what I was saying I could do. So I had to really work on when, I guess, actually when to be task focused and when to be people focused, when to have a little bit more fun in the way I communicate, or when to be slightly more direct, which I think was the biggest learning curve because it wasn't natural to me. There you go. I don't fit into task naturally. Found it out. I'm a people.
We figured it out. I love that. I'm almost the opposite to you, I think, Amie. I came from, well, I actually studied human resources at uni, so, was always on that people side. But then when I went into the workforce, I kind of fell into a lot of account management type roles to begin with. So I was always very, okay, here's my list of tasks, this is what I need to do, and that's kind of where my head sat. And thinking about how I work, having things to tick off a list is very important for keeping me motivated. And then when I stepped up into this role, well, we did a big restructure and things just ended up being like this. The sales part of it was actually the thing that I struggled with the most, building those connections to people that had no idea what I was talking about when I was so used to only kind of talking about our product to the people that had already bought it and were starting to use it. So that was what I really struggled with, even though I think outside of work, I'm a very people person. It was just trying to connect the two together, I think, that I really struggled with. So yeah, kind of, yeah, the opposite of you. Like I really struggled with that being fun. I just wanted to get in the meeting and tell you about the product and how it worked and not do all of that, like getting to know you small talk stuff.
I must say though, there are times where you can have too much people, and then the getting to know you small talk even becomes a struggle for me. And I'm like, let's not beat around the bush. We're here for this one thing, but it's a very rare occurrence that I switch into forget the BS. Let's talk about what's in front of us. But it does happen.
Well, good. I'm glad it's not just me that feels like that sometimes.
No, my poor partner, I come home and he'll be like, "Oh, you look Like, you're not usually this quiet. You're a lot more talkative. I'm like, I've talked to so many people today. Just give me 30 minutes of silence and I'll be back to normal.
Are you very people at home then as well?
I have been told in my life that I like the sound of my own voice. So I like to talk. Well, I like to, when I come home and with my family, I like telling them about my day. I like letting them know the cool things that's happened. And sometimes they're like, get to the point, Amie. We're busy.
I love that. See, my partner's very, I don't want to call him quiet, but he's definitely not as talkative, outgoing as I am. Um, Whereas I think at home he is very talkative compared to how he is out in the world. So I think he's got like people around people he knows and tasks around people he doesn't know. So that's kind of where his separation of the different options would be. Whereas, yeah, I get home and I've had enough for the day. I like to just sit and be quiet. And he comes home and he's like, I want to tell you everything. And I'm just like, shush,
Yeah.
please.
I feel like my partner and I have a somewhat different dynamic because we're both sit on the task side, but my partner is definitely a slower processor than I am. So I can take in information and it have that gut reaction and kind of run with that and have an answer in a few minutes. Whereas my partner needs to wait for about a day to really process and come up with a response, which can be sometimes a cause of frustration when I'm like, I need an answer, but you don't have an answer for me until tomorrow. That's forever away.
Yeah.
So learning that patience is pretty
I
critical.
I found something similar. My partner's a bit the same where he likes to really think about things before he answers. And it wasn't until I met him a few years ago that I also started seeing it in people at work. And I can process things really quickly. It's an immediate, like it's gone through all the different possible filters it can go through before I've somehow managed to get it from like the back of my head to the front of my head. And at work, I'll be like, oh, I'll ask something. And then another person might take a lot longer to respond. I'm like, no, I need it now. And that's another thing I've had to learn is that it's okay for people to take time and not everyone has to be running a million miles per hour their head like I am. But it's a difficult one to be okay with when it almost feels like you have to put the brakes on a little bit.
I
Yeah.
feel that 100%,
Mm-hmm.
especially with my work as well. I find that because I project a lot of self-confidence, if I present an answer quickly, it can often influence people that are slower processing and cause bias. And like, that's not a good thing. We want to make sure that we have diversity of thought. It's important that everybody has an actual voice, that they're not just repeating the first thing that they hear. So I have to bite my tongue. It feels, it's like I have an answer. I want to speak. I want to
Mm-hmm.
say something. And in those kinds of situations, I actually find taking minutes really helps me because I've already got my answer. So I need something to do to get my mind off of everybody else taking their time to process. So taking that like extra piece of work on to keep my brain and hands busy has really helped me um, allow me to bite my tongue in those situations.
Yeah, I found something similar, but when I was training our newest staff member, definitely a task, but slow processing, I would say. And like so great when she has got the tips and she knows exactly what she's doing. She's amazing and goes off and does it. But definitely, I really struggled with showing her how to do things and having to, give very clear instructions and then have her like figure it all out when I'm like, it makes sense in my head. You just do this, and this. Like, why is this like difficulty happening? Whereas it really is just because, like you, Amie, my brain is like, and then it's done. Other people get to the same point, but it just takes their system a little bit longer to get there. And so, yeah, in that sense, I really had to slow down as well. And I struggled with delegating because of that, because I was like, oh, I can just do it faster, I'll just do it. And then I ended up just kind of doing everything, which was why we hired somebody to stop me from doing that. And so that was definitely something I really, yeah, struggled with and kind of still do a little bit. I catch myself quite often being like, oh, I can just do this when it's actually a task that someone else should be doing.
I
Yeah.
feel like that's one of the bigger learning curves when you move up that leadership kind of ranking. And it's something that I'm also kind of having to learn, and not yet, but hopefully soon I will have a change manager, change lead job. And it is at the back of my mind that I will need to be able to delegate tasks out that I would now do because it's second nature. They're part of what my everyday role is. And it's how do I be okay with that internally? And then how do I share what I need and be, I guess, more task orientated and be like, this is what we need to do, and not be too gentle that things don't get done, but also gentle enough on everyone because it's a new learning experience for all involved.
I find the working with strangers as well is really difficult. So you have a statement of work that needs to come across the line, and you need to be able to try to sell it to your boss, your CEO, your board, wherever it ends up going. You need to be able to communicate to them in a way that resonates with them. And it's really hard to do that when you don't know who they are. There's different types of like influencing styles and things that you can use, but it kind of all comes down to multiple voices. So if you're communicating with authority, with confidence, it sounds like you're speaking for other people, but you can also back this up by having numbers. So having statistics behind the words that you're presenting, also even having other inputs at the same time. So if it's more than one person presenting, it does often have a stronger land. But sometimes if you're too emotive, it can be a negative. Our old CEO would tell us off if we were being too emotional about a presentation because she felt like it wasn't professional. If you're feeling very strongly about something and you need to be a bit more rational, a bit more calm, present just what's on the page so that it's not marred by this taint of human emotion. So it really does, it's difficult to figure that out. But yeah, that tip, I suppose, is just try to have as many voices as you can.
On the emotion side as well, I was never really as such an emotional presenter, but I'm an emotional person in general. I think I'm a very big empath. So I know when to tug on the right strings as well. But I did learn very, very quickly whilst at uni that to get a message across, sometimes I also need to remove my emotion from it because I don't want to undermine the severity of what I was talking about. So I did a Bachelor of Pharmacology and Toxicology. So a lot of the stuff I did talk about was drug related or brain related. And I was always worried that if I put too much passion and emotion into it, then people will be too focused on how I feel about the situation and not the actual information that I'm trying to convey and the message that I'm trying to get across.
Interesting. How did you make that switch from what you studied to what you do?
This is a very common question. It's a funny one because it's a one my dad says to me, told you so. Why didn't you listen to me? And I'm like, I have to learn my own mistakes. So I studied neuroscience originally because I had this big dream of curing Parkinson's for my great uncle. I learned very quickly that number one, that's a lot more difficult than I thought it was going to be. And number two, that actually my brain doesn't take in that information as well as I thought it might. So I stepped into pharmacology and toxicology with some business papers, and I fell in love with lean management, Kanban for operational excellence and quality management. And then I ended up as a graduate at Datacom because I knew someone who worked at Datacom previously, and I loved the culture. I loved the people that I'd met through them, and they had a grad role in business, not in technology. So I got to step into a technology company as someone who wasn't from a tech background.
Interesting. And just to kind of dive into that a little bit deeper, how have you found potentially like the overall style between the health brain and drugs side of things versus the business and tech. Have you noticed that there's quite a big difference, or is it, like Dave's been saying, very dependent on who you're talking to?
Very dependent on who I was talking to. A lot of my interactions were done at uni. I stepped straight into a grad role out of there, but it did come down to that presentation style. It was report writing. It was very formal. I think if I was to continue on in the health industry, it would possibly, there would be aspects of that, but I think the people side would also become a big part of that. But then I stepped into change management, so people is a big part of that anyway.
Yeah, that's so interesting because, like, from someone who hasn't really had much to do with the health industry other than, going to the doctor, you'd always expect them to be like very people. But then you think about everyone behind the scenes doing the research, they'll be very task, and you kind of go down this big path of, okay, all of these different roles require different things, which is kind of what we've all just been talking about. And even within each role, you have to be both sides at different aspects, which is almost confusing to think about.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it would be so dependent on who you're talking to and why you're talking to them. Like if you're getting a diagnosis for a very serious like illness, the last thing that you want is someone who is too people focused or too task focused. You need that balance because you don't want to feel like they're not yelling at you, but you want it to be a softer message. But I also think you need some directness in that so it's not too emotive. But there are definitely similarities, I would say. And then coming into tech from a non tech background and then being in change management, it's easier to be that bridge between technology and other people. So it is when I'm working in a project, very task focused. When I'm talking to end users, possibly more people focused.
I'm
Yeah.
curious to hear what the difference feels like for you between uni and work. As an example, I did a graduate or a bachelor's degree in engineering, and we had to present about our engineering papers, which are like 100-page documents, all graphs, no emotion whatsoever. And coming into a working environment, it's very different. It's about working with your colleagues. It's about understanding the people side of it and kind of forming a team. And it's a totally different landscape. And I've only learned a lot of these skills since kind of moving into management and working with people directly. So I'm curious to hear, Amie, what your thoughts are on that as well.
I must say, reflecting back on it, a lot of the pharmacology and toxicology stuff that I did was a lot more individual work. There was maybe one or two collaborative pieces. Like we did a debate where we had to work as a team to out debate the other team. We had a very difficult topic. So we were being very tactical in our approach. But then the business papers that I did were a lot more collaborative. So I feel like I was set up well stepping into business because it was very you're going to do a presentation on this topic that your group has to determine. You have to find all the information. You have to make it make sense. Now you have to present it. So that flowed nicely. But yeah, the report writing, it was actually a learning curve going from I'm writing my report, I'm going to submit it, I got a good grade, cool, to I'm writing a report, my submitting it is handing it off to other people to review, and now they're going to tell me all the mistakes that I've made and everything I've done wrong. And not taking that part personally, I think would be the biggest difference.
Yeah, I mean, I did a business management degree with HR as a focus. So like I had that very collaborative,
Hmm.
every single paper had at least one group assignment, and even your individual papers, you were, encouraged to not work together, but confer with the
Mhm.
people that you were doing a lot of your studies with. And like in my first year paper, the compulsory paper that everyone did had like 400, 500 kids in it. I say kids, we were like 17, 18, I don't know, pretty much children. And then it was kind of the same group of people that stepped through because you always had the compulsory papers. So you did become really close and you did work together. Or if someone did a paper in A that you're doing in B, you'd share ideas or vice versa. And it was very collaborative. And then going into the workforce, into like admin account managementy roles, it switched me into the task focused. Again, very opposites here, even though it's kind of ended up being in the same place, which is so interesting to see the different journeys ending up in the same kind of area. Um, but then, yeah, the task focused side I think came quite naturally to me. But then stepping back towards that people side was where I was like, oh, I've almost forgotten how to do this once I started needing to collaborate again because I'd just been so comfy in this. I've got my list of things to do. I'm going to do them kind of vibe, which, yeah, so interesting. Maybe now we can give some recommendations to our listeners about maybe how they can look to identify what type of communication style the person they're talking to might have, how they could move from one to the other depending on how the conversation is going, or if they are talking to somebody else. Dave, do you want to maybe start with that? How can we
Yeah,
figure out what we need to be saying or how we need to be saying it?
absolutely. Um, the best thing to do is to first figure out where you sit. The tool that I've used previously is called DISC, DISC. Um, it is one of many that do all of the same. There's one I've seen that is bird based. Uh, it's not a personality test. It is more so just, but the questions are feel like personality tests, you know. um, but when you ask yourself, what is my default behavior? Is my default behavior one of falling back into a rational, quick decision, or a people focused, need some time to really ruminate on the conversation behind the conversation, and placing yourself kind of somewhere on that grid? Once you understand yourself, then you can look at saying, okay, if I'm a fast communicator, I need to make sure that I am slowing down to allow for slower communicators to communicate back. If I'm finding myself to be very task focused, I need to allow the people focused emotions to come out every once in a while to actually show what this means to me, because otherwise they're not getting anything out of my tasks. So figure yourself out first. That's the main thing. And yeah, so DISC is a really good one. Another resource that I've used a lot of is kind of anything written by Brene Brown. Her Dare to Lead book is fantastic and has a lot of free resources as well that can help you kind of understand your communication and leadership styles to help you figure out what those things are.
Awesome. Amie, did you have any tips on how people could identify and figure out how to respond?
I am very fortunate that I think I can say I can trust my gut. So I was going to say trust your gut because sometimes it is, I think people like to overthink things sometimes and overcomplicate things. If someone sounds like they are a little bit confused by what you're saying, they probably are just a little bit confused with what's going on. There may not be this big, oh, we've got a whole issue over here and then this thing's happened. No, they're just what you're saying in the moment hasn't quite landed. So it's allowing them to ask the questions. It's allowing them to have that space to think and be slightly slower than maybe you will be because you have all this context. Um, I also think we've talked about it a lot that everything is different and everyone is different. There's no one right way to land a message, and there's also no one right way to build that message that you want to land. And I feel like if you aren't too sure, the more input that you can get from the right people, I'm not saying go and ask 100 people to help you craft one sentence, but if you're talking about a project and you're going to talk to an important stakeholder, if you can get 3 or 4 people who are valuable to this project to inform the messages, that can also help get that across easier sometimes.
Yeah, I love what you said a couple of sentences ago about context as well. That's something that I feel like we probably don't take into account as much when we are talking to people that we might not know at all. Doing a presentation, we've spent, weeks,
Mhm.
maybe months entrenched in this topic, learning everything we can, getting all of our resources, figuring it all out, and crafting it into a presentation or whatever it might be about what we're going to be saying. The people that we're talking to, it might be the first time they've ever heard of this thing at all before. So taking a step and looking at it and going, okay, if I was someone that had not done all of this research and all of this work into understanding this thing, would I even know what I'm talking about? That's something that, again, just jumping into the sales side of thing, that I've had to really figure out as well, because when I was just talking to people that already knew our product, it was easy. I could be like, yeah, this feature, this tool, this thing. But now I have to go, okay, someone that might not have ever done online learning before, what words are they going to understand that I'm saying, and what jargon do I need to cut out completely or completely explain everything? Will they even know what, a SCORM package is or
Mhm.
whatever it is that I might be showing them? And then taking that step back and going, okay, how can I adjust the way I'm presenting this or the way I'm talking to this person to make sure that they understand? And so I've gotten pretty good at throwing in a couple of words and then seeing what they do with them. And if they seem to understand, I'm like, okay, I can go in this direction. Otherwise, I'm like, oh, I need to step back and kind of go way higher level here. They don't know all of these individual things. I've never worked with this before. So that I kind of, sounds bad now that I think about it. I like test the person a little bit. But it really, their reaction really does help me identify whether I can go a bit more technical or if I have to kind of keep it a bit more high level. So that's something that I would say, throw out a couple of words and see what happens.
And that also is why some storytelling is beneficial, because the word journey is so overset in change management, but it allows you to bring a person on the journey. You start at point A and you start building up and you add a little bit more. And then by the time you've got to the end, they've had just enough of that context to be able to get themselves to where you might be without having to have done the 6 months of being in the middle of development or in the middle of this product.
One thing you said as well, Caitlin, is you are the person that is doing the presentation. It's something that is within your control. So there's so many things. You can't control how they're going to take the information in, but you can role model the behaviors that you want them to see, especially if you're, let's say, in a management position or a senior in the team. They'll look up to you and you can model that behavior. So when somebody presents something to you, presenting back and saying, this is what I heard, is that correct? And kind of verifying that and making sure you're on the same page. You can similarly ask that question to when you're presenting to be like, can you just repeat back what you got out of this? And it helps you do that testing, like you were saying, Caitlin, as well, to let it be that safe space for them to open up.
I think what you just said there as well is perfect for the non-verbal communication. I think people forget that it's not just about what we're saying and what we're hearing, it's also what we're seeing and how someone is presenting themselves. And I must say, if I'm talking to a leader and they are sitting on their phone, they zone out halfway through a conversation, or if I'm presenting and I see people in the audience who I would say should be listening, not listening, it's like, now anything you say after, they could come to me and go, oh yeah, that was a great presentation. I'll be like, yeah, but was it? Like, you can say all the right things, but because your visual communication wasn't lining up, it can get a bit uneasy.
Yeah, I find that when I'm dealing with the developers at work a lot, because their brains are going a million miles faster than mine are. And I often don't know if they're paying attention to me, but then they'll come back with this super eloquent answer about exactly what the problem is. And I'm like, how are you doing that while you're also scrolling through and fixing code? Like,
I think I should also just clarify, I don't mean those type of people whose brains are working at a million miles an hour and doing the thing. It's a person that you're like, I know you're scrolling through your like text
oh,
messages right now. It's a person who you can tell is zoned out. Those people are incredible. The ones that are able to actively hear what you're saying and then do the task and like, yeah, done. I'm like, mind blown.
Yeah, I think I'm fast, but compared to them, no way.
I found
Yeah.
myself in those situations too, Amie, and I find that like because I can be quite direct and blunt, I can be like, "So, is this just not important?" Because if it is, we'll just stop wasting time and move on, right? Because that's what it feels like. You're not being respected in terms of the time. They're feeling that their time is being wasted, and therefore they can just spend time on their phone. Um, it is a bit of a way to find what that mutual playing field is, and it can feel quite disrespectful, but call it out, build up better behavior.
Amazing. Okay, we've probably only got a couple more minutes, so maybe I'll throw it back to both of you for any last tips, tricks, things you want to say to the people listening. Maybe Amy, will start with you.
I kind of mentioned it before, but I think the biggest thing to remember when it comes to communicating is that there is no one right way, whether that's what you're saying, what you're making, how someone's talking to you, what kind of communicator someone else is, and that it's okay to not know sometimes because you just feel it out, have some chats, do some research, and I'm sure everything will work out well.
Mine would be to always assume positive intent. You don't know what's going on behind somebody's brain. You don't know what behavior is normal for them. You don't know what's happened to them recently that could be influencing their body language or whatever it is. Assume that they're coming to you with positive intent, and you won't be on the attack. You won't be on the defense. You'll actually have a meaningful conversation.
Amazing. And one little last note from me is that even if you have a conversation or a presentation or something and it's not quite your best work, we've probably all had that feeling where we've come away from something and been like, oh, well, that didn't go too well. Um, it's not the end of the world. You have the opportunity to go back to those people usually, maybe not necessarily in an interview environment or if you're presenting to the board or anything, but for the most part, you can reach out to them again, um, take it from a different perspective maybe, and more often than not, you'll find that they're super receptive and will allow you to either have a do-over or, they'll have a phone call and you can go over all the points that you forgot to mention or whatever it might be. And then you can always work on it for the next time as well. So treat every experience as a learning curve, even if it feels like it might have sucked. Even if it's not, you can't fix what happened, you'll be able to fix it for the next time around.
And we all learn by failure, right? Like that's the whole
Absolutely.
you someone goes, oh, don't make the same mistake I do. We're literally saying learn from our mistakes.
Absolutely. Great. Well, thank you both so much for joining me on this episode. I feel like we've traversed all over the place, but we've had a lot of really interesting discussions, and our listeners will definitely be able to get a lot out of it. Yeah, thank you all so much for joining us, and we will see you in our next episode.
Thank you.
Thank you.